Welcome to the Flawed podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me. So, I've got Kiah and Lachlan here with me today, and we're going to be talking all things body image. So, I think the best place to start is when was the first time that you're actually aware or even self conscious of the way you looked? So, we'll go Kiah first.
Um, I think maybe when I was like 15 or 16, I started to really notice. Obviously, as a swimmer, I've grown up in togs my whole life. But it wasn't until I was like standing on the beach with a group of my friends, and I just had like this distinct memory, and I was like, they were all talking about thigh gaps back when it was like the thing back then. And I was like, well, I don't have that. And like that's like a really distinct memory as to like the first time that I like really started to have those thoughts about my body. So I'd say like 15 or 16.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you say, like, obviously, like, you're a swimmer, but it was also in a bather context as well that this was brought up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Lockie?
Yeah, similar. There is a key moment. So when I was like, would have been when I was around 12 years old, I was like a little bit chubbier, and I knew that looking around, and I felt very self-conscious then. And I swam through, like, learned to swim and whatnot up until that point. And it was at that point around that 12 to 13 year age group. And kids can be mean, like they can make comments here and there, but you really remember that stuff. And I just was at a point at that age where I looked in the mirror and I hated what I looked like in bathers, just a little chubby kid. So I quit swimming because of that reason, because I was getting bullied for it. And yeah, it wasn't until a lot later that I got back into swimming again.
Yeah, nice. It's interesting, like in your situation, Lockie, where you were active and you stopped swimming because of the way you looked. When, I mean, in hindsight, we all know now that, exercise probably would have been the best thing for you if that was something that you're worried about.
Oh, 100%. And my mum and dad were very big on making sure I was still doing something. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to go play rugby. Like, that's what I'm going to do. And I still had to swim, like, for school in like term one of every year, but I wasn't swimming all year round. And it just sort of like, I felt that self conscious and that picked on as well, that I didn't want to be around those people. And swimming was my number one. I loved it that much, and to be driven to the point where I hated it and I didn't want to even go back to it because of the way I looked. And looking back on it, like, I was a little bit chubbier because I was going through puberty. Like, that's a normal thing. But yeah, when you're little 12 years old, you don't really know what's to come from there.
No, not at all. Do you think, like, in swimming, because you're in bathers, you're quite self-conscious, did that sort of fade away a little bit being doing rugby because you're like a bit more covered up?
Well, I ended up only playing rugby for school. I like was saying to mum and dad that I'd play rugby for club, and then I never ended up going through with it because the kids that were playing rugby were the kids that were up to not the best things at that age. They were the ones that were starting to drink and experiment with drugs and whatnot. And I didn't want to be around that. And I think mum and dad were pretty happy that I decided to steer away from that. I just played for school, but as you said, I think one of the reasons being was that I could cover up, because obviously in swimming there's no hiding. And I think what made me so self-conscious amongst people obviously making comments is I'd look around and there's all these kids with six packs and abs, and I was like, well, why don't I have that? And I just hated the way that I looked.
Yeah, that leads sort of onto another question that I wanted to ask you both is comparison. And have you ever been in a situation at any age where you've been, where you've compared yourself to other people and then potentially where other people in your life have said, oh, well, you look like this person or you don't look like them or whatever the context may be through, being young through puberty or even now sort of as a senior athlete. What about you, Kia? Have you been in a situation like that?
Yeah, for sure. I think every swimmer probably stands on pool deck and looks at everyone walking around, and you compare yourself to everyone all the time. And even now, I'm still comparing myself to people coming back off the break off Commonwealth Games. Like I really, really struggled with my body image. Like I put on a bit of weight on my break. Obviously, I enjoyed myself and had some time to get away from the pool, and that came with putting on a little bit of extra weight. And there was times where I didn't even want to go to the pool because I didn't want to put on togs because I hated how I looked. And I was getting up every morning looking in the mirror and going, well, like I don't want to go to the pool. I don't want to be around the other girls. Like I see what they look like in togs. I don't want to be seen standing next to them. Like the girls would be getting photos with each other on pool deck, and I'd make sure I was busy or doing something else so that I wasn't included in the photos because I didn't want to be seen standing next to these girls. And like I've just turned 26, like it's still going on in my head. And like I've seen a psych about it. Like I have these coping mechanisms, but I think it's hard to stop comparing yourself to people when you're surrounded by that all the time. And, there's always little comments that come with being competitive swimmers. And we are in a competitive environment. And oftentimes we train with people that we race against. And so you're constantly looking at them, not only as a performance perspective, as in like what times they're hitting and how they're training, but you're also looking at them as like a body composition perspective, and not taking into account that you are two completely different athletes. You just compare yourself directly to them.
Yeah. And do you think now looking back, I don't know if you have photos of that time post Commonwealth Games, do you look back now and be like, it wasn't even that big of a deal?
Oh yeah, for sure. I fall into this pattern every single year from like September to December where I really, really struggle because I have come off the back of a break. And then you look back at, like you said, you look back at photos of yourself and you think, like, there's so many people in the world that would do anything to look like how I look in that point in time, and I'm still unhappy with how I look. And that's like, it kind of makes you realize that there's something deeper to it. It's not just necessarily looking at yourself and how you look. There's things that you need to work on within yourself and your self-confidence and those kind of things to have a better idea in your head about self-esteem and body image. But yeah, it's stupid looking back on those photos. Like I'm not fat or chubby by any means, but I was so stuck in my head that I wasn't in this shape, and I'm comparing myself to how I looked when I was at the Commonwealth Games or at the Olympics, when I was in my ideal physique, like training 100%, racing at 100%. Like I had peaked for these like 2 week moment in my life. Like I'm not going to look like that all the time, and that's perfectly okay. And it's just wrapping your head around that.
Yeah, which can be so hard. And Lockie, you sort of started touching on it before about, puberty and the comparison. What other experiences have you had?
Um, I think ever like it's sort of just natural you compare yourself to the way people look. And as I said, I remember it starting at such a young age, looking at, and the thing with puberty is everybody goes through it at different times. Like I everyone was growing taller than me and losing all their little chubby fat, and I held on to it until I was probably 16, and then it just sort of all slipped right off me and I went up. And even at that point, I felt a bit better about myself, but I put so much pressure and mental energy into how I looked that even to this day, I still find it affects me. And to this day, find myself comparing my body to other people. Like it's something that I suppose on a personal level, I do care a lot about, but I shouldn't care as much as what I do. But yeah, it is tough, and as Kiah said, like when you're in that elite training environment, training against the people that you race, like as she said, you there's the times, but then you see the way that they look in their body, and you're like, oh, why don't I look like that? Like, and but then on top of that, there can be coaches that are enforcing that as well, which I think is another whole aspect of this situation.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that because there's so many things that like after you guys have said that I want to ask. And particularly when it comes to puberty, because that's one of the reasons why I wanted both of you to come on. I wanted different perspectives, both female and male, because puberty is so different for everyone, even across the same gender, it varies so much. What did you sort of notice, and did puberty sort of have an effect on you directly with your body, Kiah?
Yeah, so I think like girls going through puberty, a lot of swimmers tend to go through it quite late, just because we are doing so much work. It kind of pushes our puberty back. But girls get boobs and they get bums, and everyone looks so different. And you know, doing 70 kilometers a week or whatever it isn't going to stop you getting boobs or a bum when you go through puberty. And I think like Lachie said, like boys can be mean, girls can be nasty too. There's always little like side comments like, oh, look at so and so's boobs, like she has huge boobs, like I can't believe that. Look at her bum, like look at her the way her legs jiggle, like it's little comments like that. And I think when you're going through puberty and at those ages, like, and everyone's in completely different stages, it is hard, and everyone's bodies looks different and everyone's growing really differently, and you do kind of tend to get really caught up in how you feel. And I think puberty also coincides with the moment that you realize that you do want to look a certain way, or you have expectations to look a certain way. So having all these changes going on with your body, and then having this whole change in your mental state on how you should look, how you think you should look, it just really coincides with this like one big explosion of like multiple things going on. And it is really hard being in that environment where you're seeing people with one layer of clothing over themselves. Like Lockie's just got togs on, I'm covered from here to here, and that's about it. You can really see everything that's going on with people's bodies. So it is really hard in that environment to go through puberty.
Yeah, and even girls getting hips and trying to get race feathers on over hips or a bum is a challenge at the best of times. And then for your body to change and try and still get them on, like that's hard. And then be like, oh, well, why am I not this size anymore? Like I was this size, a couple months ago. Like what's changed? Like the scales may not have changed, but your shape has changed, and so things just don't fit either.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, oh, I used to wear size 8 togs. Why do I now have to wear size 10 togs? I used to be size 23 in racing suits, and now I have to wear a 25. Or why don't my togs cover my boobs like they used to? Why don't my togs cover my bum like they used to? Yeah, there's just like so many things being thrown at you when you're that age.
Yeah. What about you, Lockie?
Um, yeah, it's the whole puberty thing. It's so hard because looking back on it, that that's what's meant to happen with the body. But when you're in that moment and everything's going on, and you're so young, you've never dealt with it before, it can be rough. And then on top of that, I feel like nowadays, and it's obviously said everywhere, with social media added on top of that, and you see one way of how your body's meant to look. And being a guy, six pack, abs, pecs, muscles, like that's what is meant to be the ideal body. And even more so in swimming, that's what you're told you need to look like, kind of thing. And I'm fortunate. I'd like to think I have that, but it's only because I've put so much pressure on myself and worked so hard to try and make myself look that way. And even now, I can wake up and still not like the way that I look, and it weighs on you mentally. And I think the thing that is almost so silly with it is on when it comes to the competition, like when you're racing, more than 90% of it is mental. Like the way like we get skin folds weighted like all the time. And yeah, it does have a place and is important to results to a degree. But I feel like what's more important and going to get you those results is mentally. Like I know there's people out there that their body may not be there, but they're mentally ready to go and they get their results. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit complex, I guess. There's so many different factors. I just sort of got a bit lost there.
Okay. There are
There was
so
a
many
lot going
things.
on.
Yeah, and there's so many of these things that are out of our control, especially like puberty, like your body's changing. But there's all these hormone changes going on too. So your thought process isn't always the same either. There's like a lot going on for you to comprehend. And as you say, it's all new. You've never experienced it before. And you could have told me at the age of sort of 12, 13 about all this stuff, and I would have looked at you like, yeah, cool, and just moved on. Like there's no way I would have listened to what you had to say.
Yeah, 100%. Like you people, and it's sort of like my mum and dad would tell me that, and they're like, "Oh, you'll lose." I'm like, "Oh, what do you know? Like, you don't know anything, and
Yeah.
you think you know everything." And it's only once you get older and you can look back on it and be like, "Oh, okay, they were right. Like, I was gonna lose it or whatever."
Yeah. And especially coming from a female's perspective, 16-year-old girls, there is no way you can tell them what is going to happen. You do not want to cross a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah, no, for sure. And can I just touch on like one of the things that Lachie said? It just kind of like
Yeah.
ticked something in my brain. Lachie was saying how like the male standard is these big toned buff guys with six packs. And that's really hard for male swimmers because a lot of them are that body shape because of the work we do. And if you're not that shape, that's where the self-confidence issues come from and the pressures come from. But females have it completely like the complete opposite, right? So we're showing these Instagram people who are thin, they have no muscle, they have tiny little legs, tiny little arms, and all of a sudden we have big muscles, big legs, strong arms. Our backs are full of muscles. You put on a dress and it doesn't fit you properly across the shoulders because your shoulders are so big. And so for girls, it's like it's reminding yourself that your body is made for swimming and not to walk down a runway.
Yeah.
Those girls that walk down runways and look like that, they can't get in and swim as fast as you can. So I think for young girls, that's like a big thing that I took when I was that age, is not comparing ourselves to people on social media because they're not swimmers. They're models and they don't live the life that we do. And obviously it's just, like Lachie has the same thing, right? There's hundreds of guys on Instagram that are spending hours and hours in the gym that are this ideal male body type, and then you have male swimmers who have tiny little hips and strong legs and then broad shoulders, and it's completely different body shapes.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I remember seeing something. There was one that I saw on TikTok with Channing Tatum about his role for Magic Mike, and then Chris Hemsworth with his role for Thor. They've both said how it's a full-time job to look the way they do for that movie, and it is not sustainable at all. It's not something they can do full-time. It is for that role, and once that role's done, they're done because they just can't keep it up.
And I think the thing also with that is when they are filming those movies, they are getting their body ready for like a very small window of filming. And that's sort of similar to us and sort of touches back to what Kiah was saying about being ready for that 2 week block where your body's at peak fitness and like everything. You can't maintain that forever and your body's going to go through changes. And I think it's just being, you can be aware of it and know that's happening, but it still is a mental battle. Like, as Kiah was saying, coming back off break and not liking the way that she looked. But if you look back now, it's not as bad as what you're making out in your head.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd love to talk about breaks because, as a show, it's not sustainable to train all year round. We deserve breaks at times. It's a lot taxing mentally and physically, and COVID with forced breaks as well, or injury and those sort of things. When you do have time out of the pool, how do you come back knowing? I mean, it's a little bit different when it's a pre-planned break. Like you know that you're going to have some time over Christmas, you're going to have some time off after a really big meet. So those pre-planned breaks, does that sort of change your mentality knowing, okay, I know this break's coming. I know my body's going to change, and that's okay because I'm going to give myself some time to indulge in things that I wouldn't normally in season. We'll go Lachie first.
I,
Sorry.
Me,
okay.
I think I used to be really bad with it. Like, I wouldn't want to go on a break because I wouldn't want to lose any fitness or, put on any weight or anything like that. But I don't know. I'm sort of, well, like, we have a break coming up. We got 2.5 weeks off after states over Christmas, and I'm so keen to just put on a bit of weight. Like, I'll burn it off. Like, I don't care. I just need a bloody break from swimming. And the funny thing is, like, this year, like, I went away over to Europe to watch Taylor and Kaylee race at the Com Games. Then we stayed over and did London and Dubai afterwards. And so I was trying to train as best I could over there, but it was really like pretty hard. And then we came back and I got like pointed at for the way that I looked. I put on a bit of weight. I hadn't trained properly, and we had short course a week later. I went down there and I had my best comp in the last couple of years, like swam a couple of PBs and whatnot. And I think that just goes to show, once again, it's more so like how important your mental side of it is, and it's not all necessarily physical.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Kiah?
Yeah, I think what Lachie said, like it is so important to like take those breaks from swimming, give yourself time to refresh. And I think with the pre-planned breaks, like you do know that time is coming off and you can kind of prepare yourself mentally for what's going to happen after. But I was the same as Lachie. I used to hate taking breaks. I didn't want to like lose fitness. I didn't want to put on weight. Like I'd go crazy on my break just because I was scared of how my body was going to change. And it was like probably this year is the first time that I actually had 2 to 3 weeks off and kind of actually just relaxed. Like I went on walks and did those kinds of things and exercised a little bit, but my exercise was for my mental health, not because I wanted my body to look a certain way, which was something that like I had previously done when I was on my breaks. I was always exercising to make sure my body looked a certain way, not exercising because it made me feel good or because I wanted to get up in the morning and go for a walk on the beach because that's how I wanted to start my day. So I think it is important to take those breaks and to just accept that that's what's going to happen. And there is no stress of coming back for those breaks. Everyone's has breaks at some point, and just because you put on a little bit over your break or you look a certain way when you come back, that doesn't mean you're going to not be performing in 8-12 months time. Like there's always time to sort things out.
Yeah, and I think this is probably a really important time to bring this up too, is, there's a lot of people that are sort of finished year 12 now and they may not have had a full training schedule because that school was priority. And so their bodies potentially may have changed or stress eating and those sort of things. So, that's something they need to consider as well, that yes, my body's changed, but I've gone through a really stressful and important year and that's just how it is. And if I get back to training, then that will sort of resolve itself. But something else I want to talk about too, I think, particularly this time of year, is we are coming into Christmas and there is a lot of conversation around food and indulging and those sort of things. And there's also time off normally involved in that too. How do you guys go managing that? And what sort of advice would you give to people around this time of year, Kiah?
I think for me the big thing is still enjoy yourself. Obviously, like you're going to sit down with your family and have a big Christmas lunch and, do all that stuff. But I think it's just accepting that day for what it is and enjoying it and being able to relax and enjoying being around family and friends and enjoy your time off. And just because you eat a little bit one day doesn't mean you have to spend the next day starving yourself. Like that's not how it works. One day, 3 days, 5 days isn't going to ruin your entire progress. I think it's more important to relax and have that time to yourself mentally. You're going to be better off coming back to the pool if you do that than if you spend 1 week, 2 weeks stressing about how you look and just working yourself up to the point of exhaustion because you're so stressed and worried with how you look. That's not going to benefit you at all. I think just relaxing and enjoying that time and taking it for what it is the best way to deal with it.
Yeah. What about you, Lachie?
I think Kiah pretty much hit every point there. Just enjoy yourself over the break. Like it's Christmas time. You're seeing family. Like I know for me, I'm going to be eating as much as I can. I don't care if I put on any weight. Like food's going to be food and it's going to be good on Christmas. So, you know, and it's called a break. Like physically it's a break, but also it's so important mentally to switch off because it is such a grind, every prep, all that training, all the hours of work, and you need that time to switch off. And if you don't switch off in your break, you're just eating away at yourself and adding more and more stress and pressure. And it's easier said than done, obviously. Like as I said, I feel like previously when I've had breaks, I was going out exercising, not because I wanted to, because I wanted to stay fit. I wanted to stay looking a certain way. And, I still struggle with that. Like I know in my break, I'll probably get to a point where I don't have the six pack as defined as what I want it. And it'll play with my head. Like I know that's going to come. Like you can be aware of it, but it is a hard thing to deal with.
Yeah, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this too, because you said after coming back from Europe, you didn't quite look the same, and other people sort of made comments on it. Do you think that you still performed as well as what you did in such a quick turnaround because mentally you were in such a good place?
I think that was a huge part of it. Like, obviously, physically, I wasn't as fit as what I could have been if I had been swimming properly through those 2.5 weeks. But, it was such a great opportunity to go over to Europe, support, the swimmers, and have a bit of a, like, I haven't had a holiday in years. I couldn't tell you the last time I had, well, the last time I went overseas like that was back in like 2015. So it mentally was such a refresher for me. And I think that did play a huge part in it.
Yeah. Have you had an experience like that too, Kiah?
Um, Not necessarily like that, but I think that he's like bang on with that performance is like 100%, not 100% mental, 90% mental. And like, being in that headspace is what makes people perform well. And if you're sitting there sitting on pool deck before you're about to warm up and you're looking at how everyone looks, like you're not concentrating on your race and you're not free to just get in and perform. That does take a toll on you, and I think it's important to be aware of that. And I've had so many people that I know that haven't been in the best shape physically maybe, but they're bang on mentally and they perform super well. So it is like a really big key factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And we sort of touched on this before, so I'd love to sort of delve into it a little bit further. What sort of comments have you had externally about your body, positive or negative? And what sort of impact has that had on the way that you've thought about your body, potentially the way you've trained, your thought process, performance, those sort of things? We've said that skin folds and body composition is such an important part and is included in the training aspect of being an athlete at that elite level. That is something that happens for performance reasons, but it can play a really significant impact on the way that we view ourselves mentally. What sort of comments have you had, Kiah?
So I've had comments go both ways. I've had the like, are you sure you're eating enough? You've lost too much weight, like you're looking very thin. I've had coaches on pool deck make comments about that, have said comments to like my coach at the time, oh, Kia's looking really good, Kia's looking really fit, which is still making comments on my body, like regardless of if it's positive or not. And then I've had like oh, you live with boys now, are you eating too much, are you copying what the boys eat? So I've had like all sides of the spectrum, good and bad comments. And regardless, I just think comments about people's bodies just shouldn't be said at all. Like, it's just got nothing to do with other coaches or other athletes. Like, it just shouldn't be said in that frame. And then like touching on skin folds, I had my last skin fold measurement was maybe 4 weeks ago, I think. And I had been working really hard to bring my skin folds down and they didn't shift. And I think I cried for 4 hours after. So that's someone who's been at an elite level, who has had skin folds their whole life growing up, and they still impact me. And there's been times in the past where I've had a discussion with coaches about skin folds and I've said, I don't think this is right for me at the moment mentally. And like, I understand that it's important for performance and that it is a performance indicator and that it's just one of the things that the coaches look at. But I think for anyone who's younger that's listening, if you're uncomfortable with getting those numbers or looking at those numbers, having that discussion with your coach and saying, I don't think I'm in the right headspace to be told my skin fold numbers, then that's just what you need to say to your coach, and they should be able to respect that. They can look at the numbers themselves, the dietitians can look at the numbers themselves, the nutritionists can look at the numbers. But if you don't want to know what they are, you don't need to know what they are, and that's perfectly okay too.
Yeah, I'd even like to know, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but do you think that skin fold should still be a thing, given the impact that it has and, the life that we sort of live at the moment with body image? Do you think that they still, like the pros still outweigh the cons and it's still worthwhile doing?
I still think that there's a place for them. We also do DEXA body scans, which I think is probably probably a better way of doing it, where we can actually see our muscle to fat ratios. So that gives you a bit more insight as to if you're actually gaining muscle. It's not so dependent on weight and someone taking measurements, which can be different every single time. It's an actual machine that does it, which I think is probably slightly more beneficial than skin folds. And I do understand that skin folds have a place. It is handy to look back at what I raced at when I did my best and what my skin folds are when I did this time, and comparing that and sitting down with my nutritionist and making plans to try get back my body back to what it was when I performed at my best. But in saying that, coming back off a 3-week break and getting skin folds a week later is not going to do anything good for your mental health. So I do think there is a time and place, and I do think that they can be used in a productive way. It's just making sure that they are used in that productive way and that swimmers are in the right headspace to have those discussions, because it impacts everyone differently.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Lachie? What sort of comments and thoughts on skin folds and everything in between?
Well, with skin folds, like I only got my first one upon moving to Griffith. I'd never had a skin fold prior to that, and weight was never like weight skin folds. All that was never a massive point that was like taken too much of a concern about. But yeah, when I got my first one, like it was in, I was maybe had the second or third lowest one out of the boys in the squad. Like I was pretty good, but I didn't. It wasn't fully explained to me like where I should be at, and I took that as, oh, I need to get that number as low as possible, and I lost like a lot of weight and a lot of muscle, and I just started swimming slower and slower and slower just to try get this number down, and it wasn't communicated that well to me, and so yeah, I I haven't really felt the benefits of a skin fold. Like my number's never been drastically high, but I don't know. I feel as though for me personally, it hasn't had much of a use for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I know, like, from a swimming perspective, I haven't been in a situation where I've done skin folds. However, with my qualification, with my degree, it is something that we had to learn to do. And in my first year of uni, so still reasonably young, um, that was something that we had to do, perform on each other within the first 2 weeks of class. So these are people I've never met, they're students, they're teammates, I guess, in a way, perform on each other. It's quite confronting. So whilst, from a swimming perspective, I've never had to do it with health professionals, doing it on a stranger that you've never met and are spending the rest of the year and the next few years with as classmates is very confronting. And, you can get different measurements and, people that have never experienced skin folds before, you're not generally wearing a lot. Like it'd be quite similar to being in bathers. Someone is literally trying to grab a piece of skin or fat and then use like tongs or tweezers to measure what that is and if that's good or bad or where you need to be at. It's quite full on. And even like we didn't necessarily record numbers and give a result. I was still like, oh, like this is really uncomfortable.
Yeah, it can be quite confronting. Like, and the thing that I think with skin folds is it matters who does your test, because some people can pinch more skin than what your other tester might do. So I think it's very important to have the same person each time to be testing you. And I've heard from a few other swimmers like they'll prefer one tester because they don't grab as much skin, so the skin fold is like a lot less. It just seems to have a lot of inaccuracies, the whole testing method of it.
Yeah. Yeah. As Kiah said, I think, the machines that are doing body composition are probably, personally, probably the best way to go forward, both mentally and physically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a bit, sorry, Renee, just to
That's
jump in
okay.
real quick. I think like a big thing with skin folds as well is making sure that you're not comparing your numbers to other people's. Like I use my skin folds to look at what my numbers were when I was performing my best, and to what they are now, and comparing that rather than comparing to what the other girls at the pool were when they were performing at their best, what their tests are. It's hard. Like, you go into the change rooms after training and everyone wants to talk about their skin folds and if they went down and if they went up. And I think that's where a lot of the dangers of doing skin folds on the younger swimmers comes from, is because everyone wants to talk about it. And I'll never forget, like, when I've been getting skin folds since I was 15. So that's 10 years of data that I have of my body changing and shifting. But I'll never forget when I got my first test, one of my coaches said to me, like, don't worry about what your number is. It's about, don't compare your number to other people's. It's just about yours. Two of the girls on the British team who have the highest skin folds are also the two top performers on the team. So it doesn't actually matter what your numbers are compared to anyone else's. That was their best numbers for them. But just because they were higher than other girls, that's not going to impact their performance. It's a very individual score.
Yeah. And I think too, like, if you look at the Olympics and every sport that is part of the Olympic Games, if you picked someone from swimming to basketball to shot put to gymnastics to long distance running, the body shape for each of those is so different. And these are the people that are competing at the pinnacle event in sport. And that's the best that there is. They're in peak condition for what their sport requires. And someone who's in shot put to bodybuilding to swimming, none of those bodies are even close to being the same. Like, they're so different.
The difference from sport to sport is like crazy. I was talking to Jared Hughes, who's an Olympic medalist snowboarder. He does like the downhill racing, and just talking about, like, from a swimmer's perspective, we're trying to sort of, as we get closer to a competition, be as light as possible so we got less weight to carry through the water. Whereas him in his preparation, he's almost trying to be as heavy as possible so he has as much weight to carry him down that slope to be as fast as possible. But then to counter that, he's also got to think about another area of his weight, like, so when he's in the air, he can fly further. And then, yeah, the body shapes in other sport. Basketball, they're tall, they're lanky. Shot put guys are massive. And like, if they were in swimming, they'd be deemed fat, they'd be ripped upon, but they're the best in the world. And that, yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. It just goes to show that, whatever your body needs is what it will do. And it's about what it can do and not what it looks like.
That's it.
Yeah. Do you think, we've sort of touched on it a little bit, being in bathers has an impact? Like, I know, Kiah, you said before, when you were uncomfortable after the Commonwealth Games, it was like, oh, the last thing I want to do is be in bathers. And, if coming back after Christmas could get that same feeling, or you had something that didn't sit well in your stomach and you're feeling a bit bloated, and the last thing you want to do is put on a tight pair of bathers and go to the pool. Is there ways that you just, like, mental coping strategies that you have to sort of push past that? Or it's like, you know what, today I'm going to jump on an exercise bike, or I'm going to go for a run, I'm going to go in the gym. I'm still moving my body, but I'm not putting myself in a position where I feel really vulnerable. Have you had sort of any experiences like that, Kiah?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely times where I put on togs and I don't like what I see. There's a little bit sticking out here that I don't like, or my belly's sticking out a little bit further than what I would like. And it really is easy to see everything when you're in a pair of bathers. Like, it's really not covered much. And in those moments, I obviously still have to go to the pool, and I still get myself to the pool, and I'm there to train and I'm there to perform. But something that I recently spoke to my psychologist about being a little bit kinder to myself when I'm feeling like that is, think about why I like my friends. And if I think of why I like my friends, it's because they're nice and they're funny and they're smart and they're thoughtful. I don't like my friends because they have skinny legs, or they have arms that look the way I want to look, or they're really skinny, or their hip bones stick out, or things like that. I like them because of who they are. And it's really like adjusting your headspace into thinking that I am still kind and thoughtful and funny and smart, and people aren't being my friend just because I look a certain way or because I don't look a certain way. And I think it's just shifting your headspace into that rather than looking in the mirror and not liking what you see and then thinking that people aren't going to like you because they don't like what they see, so to say.
Yeah. What about you, Lachie?
Um, Sorry, I just sort of forgot what the first question was.
That's okay.
I don't want to
Um,
start rambling.
when you don't feel great about your body, is there strategies that you have to overcome that? Or being in bathers, how does that affect you? And if you're having a shitty day, do you do something else as like going for a run or going to the gym or jumping on a bike? What do you like? How do you cope with it?
Um, I don't know. So, like, obviously, being in togs, there's no hiding from anyone, and I don't know. Sometimes coming back off a break, if I'm not feeling that good, I'll almost try and hide my body before getting in the water as much as possible. Like, I found myself doing that a couple of months ago, funnily enough, and it was so stupid, but I don't know. I felt like I was a bit pudgy and almost wanted to hide it because I don't know. I'd sort of been. I just had these comments going on in my own head, and which is really bad. And I don't necessarily have a proper coping mechanism for that. You know, some days I feel fine and I brush it off. It's no biggie, but you know, other days it's a battle for sure.
Yeah. I'd love to know, and this is a little bit off field, I guess, in a way, but I have this photo of myself where I look so happy, like I'm mid-laugh. Like it's a great photo. And when I first looked at it, the first thing I was like, oh, I have a double chin because like my head's back and I'm laughing. And I didn't see the fact that I look so happy because I am laughing. Do you have moments where you can look back and be like, oh, that was really silly to pick apart my body in that way because this is a great photo or this was a great moment, Kiah?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, we were getting photos of ourselves constantly at com games, and mind you, this is when my body's at like its absolute peak, and I was performing so well, but I was looking at these photos getting taken, and I didn't like that my stomach was sticking out because we just had lunch and I was a little bit bloated, or I didn't like the way that, the same thing, like you're laughing and like you look like you have a double chin because you're laughing or you're like giggling with your friends. And looking back at those now, and I'm like, why did you ever think that? Like, that is such a stupid thing. Absolutely no one is looking at those photos and thinking that. Like, they're just seeing someone that is happy and like ready to swim and having fun with their friends. And it's just so silly looking back on those photos now, months later, and like, why did I ever pick them apart as much as I did?
Yeah. What about you, Lockie?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been photos that I've got when I'm feeling I'm happy, and then I'll look at it and there'll be one small thing and I'll pick it apart and not want to post it or whatever. And then there can be times where I've gotten a photo and I can be like so down in the dumps, but I'm looking good, and then I'll post that. And yeah, it's so silly, like the stuff that you tell yourself, because no one really cares that much. You care more about it than what other people will care about it.
Yeah. And then sort of on the same sort of wavelength, I remember one time I was putting my race bathers on and they were a new pair and I was with friends because there was no way I was getting them on my own. And it's like I had the open back and so my bum was stuck like through the hole. And like when you're getting them on, it is not the most flattering thing at all. Like there is bits and body parts sticking out left, right, and center. And so my bum is sticking out this hole. And initially I felt so embarrassed. I was like, this is so unflattering. And me and my friends just stood there laughing. Like, how funny is this? Your bum is like sticking out through this hole. It's like perfectly shaped for your bum. Like the stupidest thing, but like I felt so uncomfortable. But then laughing with my friends, like, this is so silly. Like, you're never in a situation like this ever. And they never questioned about how, oh, that looks really like, well, you shouldn't look like that, or, your bum probably sticks out a bit too far, or whatever. Do you have sort of like an embarrassing story or where you sort of felt self-conscious and then someone said something or you've thought about it differently and it's like, oh, that's actually kind of funny, or it's not as serious and the mood sort of lightened a little bit?
I don't know that there's like specific moments, like a specific memory like you have, but I think having those people around you that you're like okay to laugh with and have little jokes with and things like that. And, um, I remember lying on like some sunbeds tanning with the girls, and we were like scrunching our tummies over, sitting up eating, and we were all just laughing at ourselves, looking like little hunchbacks, like eating food like this. And like no one cared how anyone looked while they were doing it, and it was just like with those friends, it was just like complete freedom to be how you are. Like you didn't have to sit up and like stuck your tummy in and make sure you looked a certain way. It was just that freedom to be who you are without having to explain yourself or look a certain way or try to make yourself feel a certain way. You're just around friends that like you for who you are and really couldn't give two craps about how your body looks when you're sitting down having a good meal together.
Yeah. What about you, Lachie?
I really can't think. I've been sitting here. I'm glad you went to Kiah first, but the whole time I haven't been able to think of a good or funny story that fits that scenario, unfortunately.
That's all right. I know, like I have so many, and sometimes they're not always about my body, but like there was this time at training, and it was this song that came on. I couldn't even tell you what the name of it is, to be honest. But my friend, he pulled up his shirt, and he had been on break, and so he put on a few kilos, and he knew that, and he would make jokes about it, so he was quite comfortable. And I know that he'd be comfortable with me sharing this now. And he used like the bass of the drum and he'd like slap his stomach and it'd like wobble. He's like, look, it's like the speaker, like when you get like the vibrations. And then we just like made a joke of it, but no one even questioned the fact about what he looked like. It was just he's just making fun and it's lighthearted and it's just that's just how he looked. It was just easy. I'd
Yeah,
love
I
to.
think that's I think
Sorry,
that's
go.
really important. Like there's a lot of people out there that are comfortable with that, but I also feel like there's probably those people that on the outside they're doing that, but then also you don't know what's going on inside everyone's head at the same time, which I think is just important for everyone to know is like everyone's going to have their own mental battles going on upstairs, no matter how outwardly open and happy they are. Everyone's going to be having those battles on the inside, and I think it's just good in that situation around friends that you can feel safe like that though. Like I think that's important to have as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important, as you say, be kind to everyone because you don't know what sort of headspace they're in. And, you might think, oh, they've lost a weight or they look so fit at the moment, but, mentally they could be absolutely ridiculing their body at the same time that you're thinking those thoughts.
Mm.
So it's really important to sort of keep that in mind that, whilst you have bad days about your body, everyone else can too. So keep that in mind, always be kind. Um, I sort of want to wrap up with advice that you'd sort of give either your younger self or someone that's sort of, in a similar situation in terms of their body. What advice would you give around how they view themselves, um, or anything sort of about their body? What advice would you give, or what sort of, if you have any techniques when you're feeling bad about your body, what do you sort of do to combat that? We'll go, Kiah.
I think I'd probably just tell my younger self that, your body's made for swimming and for swimming fast, and that's what you need to focus on, and you need to fuel your body in the right way. There's no point starving yourself or not eating the right things because you want to look a certain way. Female swimmers are meant to be strong and have muscles, and that's what your body's made to do. And I think a thing that I touched on earlier before is just being kind to yourself and remembering that people like you because of your personality and how you treat others, not because of how you look. And you don't judge your friends on how they look. You don't look at your friends and go, oh, I'm not going to be her friend today because her thighs are touching when she sits down. That's just so ridiculous. You like people because they're thoughtful and funny and smart, and if you work on those things within yourself, that's the most important thing, not how you look.
Yeah, definitely. Lucky.
And mine's sort of pretty simple. Like if I was to go back to and be able to talk to that little 12, 13-year-old Lachie. Oh, all right. Oh, I've just got somebody else calling me. Sorry. Um, oh gosh, I don't even know how to cancel it. Oh well, there we go. she'll be right. Yeah, if I was to go back to little 12, 13-year-old Lachie, I'd just sort of tell him to not quit and not give away the thing that you love so much just because you think you're fat. Because I mean, I could tell him that he's not fat, he's going to lose it all, but I mean, he wouldn't believe that. But not to give up on something that you love so much and are so passionate about, that made you feel good. Because I know whenever I'm in the water, I loved it. I loved being in the water. That's why I'm still swimming. But I know that Lachie, he still loved being in the water, but it was the people around him and the things that were being said about him being a bit chubby is what made him not want to be in the water, so that people couldn't see, his body.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to know that anyone that's listening, that we all three of us here sort of come from different backgrounds, different upbringings. Like, yes, we're all involved in swimming and different levels, but we all still have bad body image days. We all have insecurities about our body. It's stuff that comes up all the time, and it's totally normal. Well, thank you both for joining me today. It's been really good having both of you on and getting two different perspectives about all things body image. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us.